Have you ever gotten into your car completely confident that you knew exactly where you were going? Only you put the address into the GPS and you realize you're heading into the wrong direction the whole time. You thought you knew the route, you thought you understood the destination and the assignment, but clearly you're wrong. So if you've ever felt like you were in motion, but you're not on the right path, stick around. Blessings, thanks for joining us this week. We're going to be talking about 1 Kings 17, verses 3 through 7. Give you a little bit of context here. We're going to be talking about Elijah. Elijah pretty much told the king Ahab that based on his God's displeasure with him, that God was going to hold back the dew and the rain for a period of time until God gave his word. And then so we get to verse 3 after Elijah does what God tells him to do. And God says, "Leave here, turn eastward, and hide yourself by the brook of Cherith, east of the Jordan. And you are to drink from the brook that I have commanded the ravens to feed you there." So Elijah did what the Lord had told him, and he went and lived by the brook of Cherith, east of Jordan. And the ravens would bring him bread and meat in the morning and the evening, and he would drink from the brook. And sometime later, however, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. So I want to focus on verse 3 and verse 7. But since we're there, we're just going to touch on all three in between. Now, for those of you that are familiar with this passage, most people, when they talk about it, they talk about the ravens feeding Elijah, God using the ravens to feed Elijah. I don't really want to focus so much on the ravens, although the ravens do have some significance. We're going to talk about the ravens a little bit. So let's just get right into it. So verse 3. So when God tells Elijah to leave and go eastward, he tells him to go to a brook. Not a river, not a stream, but a brook. Now the brook is the smallest body of flowing water. And notice I said flowing, because you want water that's flowing for purification processes or purposes, right? You want water that's going to be flowing. Water that's not moving or not flowing is stagnant. So you're more likely to get sick. It's more likely to be infested, things of that nature, where flowing water is going to be, from a purification standpoint, it's going to have more purification properties in it because it is moving. And that's a whole nother lesson and at a whole nother time. All right. So when I'm looking at this, so we got them going to a brook. We got them going to the smallest body of water. But then it's a particular place, Cherith. So why Cherith? So the word Cherith simply means to be cut off, to be separated. So we have him going to a brook that represents being cut off, being separated, a point of separation. So right now in my head, okay, something else is happening. So I read a little bit further and it says east of Jordan. Well, Jordan represents a place of promise, a place of fulfillment, because that's what a place of familiarity. That's what the children of Israel, and when God was moving them to the promised land, they went through the Jordan. So this is like, okay, the Jordan makes sense. But now I'm looking at it saying, he's not sending him to the Jordan, to a place of promise. He's sending him away from the Jordan, a place of unfamiliarity, a place he's separating him. But not only is he separating him, he's taking him to a place that he's unfamiliar with, a place that he doesn't know anything about, a place that he's never been. But not only is he taking him to a place that he's never been, he's taking him to a place and he's saying, I'm not going to provide water, rain, dew for a few years, but I want you to come and sit by the brook in this place that's unfamiliar, and I want you to drink from the brook. So I'm providing for you, but I'm not providing for you in the magnitude that I'm capable of, because I could have sent you east of Jordan to a river, to a stream, but God chose to send them to a brook. Now, why this brook? Why this place of separation, right? Why this place of unfamiliarity? It's because God was putting him into a place where he was pulling him out of the public eye. He was pulling him away from people that and things that he was familiar with. He was pulling him to a place of separation, to a place where he had to depend on God, because he didn't know where restaurants was, speaking in today's term, where the closest fast food place was, where the closest Pizza Hut was, where the closest grocery store or the gas station. He was sending him out to this rural place that he had never heard, this place that was desolate, this place that was isolated, this place that was so isolated that God had to send birds to send him food, but not only once a day, but twice a day. So that shows God's provision, that even in this, God was providing for him twice a day. He was getting fed twice a day, and he was drinking from the brook. Now, it wasn't a large body of water, but it was water. So he had food, he had water, but he was alone. But here's the thing, where the ravens come into play. The ravens come into play because the ravens were an unclean animal. So it was a little illogical for Elijah to think that God was going to use this unclean animal, this raven, to feed him twice a day. And the raven brought him bread and meat. So when we're looking at it from that perspective, God will isolate us. God will pull us away from things that are familiar and provide for us in ways that are unfamiliar, ways that seem illogical, ways that don't even make any kind of sense to us. Here's the catch though. When we reject those ways, those messengers, the people or the things that God sends to provide for us, like he promises, we don't get the provision. And then we look at God like, God, you didn't provide when you said you did. When in fact, God did. What if Elijah would have, when the ravens came, if he would have just started shooing them away, if he would have just telling them to get away from here because he saw them as being unclean, then guess what? The way that God was blessing him, or the provision that God was providing him for, he would have missed out on, simply because it didn't come the way that he thought that it should come. So that's the deal with the birds. But the last thing here that I told you that really got me was God sent him to this brook. But in verse 7, it tells us that the brook then dried up. So does that mean that God can only provide for us for a certain amount of time? No, it doesn't. I said, well, God, why did you allow the brook to dry up? And he said, because water that flows is moving. And oftentimes we get into a place of stagnation. We get into a place where God wants us to move, wants us to listen, but we've gotten so comfortable in where we are. It's no longer unfamiliar. It becomes familiar, that we don't want to leave, that we don't want to go, that we forget what we are supposed to be doing because we've gotten comfortable in this place of isolation. And in fact, this place of isolation is no longer a place of isolation because we've learned the layout of the land. We found the farmer's market or the farm up the street or the gas station that was hidden a couple miles up the road that, well, we couldn't see because of the trees. So that was the first thing. But the second thing was Elijah was not exempt from what God had said he was going to do across the land. And sometimes God shows us things or moves through us, and we think that we should be exempt from what's going on. He felt the discomfort of no water or no dew in the land. But yet, God still provided for him. So what does that mean? That means that you may be feeling the discomfort of things that are taking place. But if you trust in God and if you obey him, he's still going to provide. So what I got out of this was that in the unfamiliar place and the dried up brook and being fed by the most illogical thing that you can think of, the most unexpected and unassuming thing that you would think God would use to provide for you, Elijah learned to have a greater level of faith, a greater level of dependence. He had a greater level of clarity, and his communication with God was much greater. So what am I saying? I'm saying sometimes you got to go to Cherith, east of Jordan, and you got to drink from the brook and let God commune with you, talk to you, and show you what he wants to do in your life and how he wants to provide for you, as long as you are moving like the water that he's providing for you. Be blessed and ask yourself, where is or was my place of Cherith? And how did God provide for me? That's your reflection point for this week.